We'll cover all this and much more in today's video. Ancient Australia, one of the scariest places on Earth. Let's start with an animal that you can't imagine the Pleistocene Australia without. What is Australia's calling card today? You guessed it, the kangaroo. The largest species, the kangaroo, reaches up to 2 meters in height and up to 3 meters in length, including the tail. They usually weigh up to 60 kilograms. Now, imagine a beast weighing 200 to 240 kilograms. To be precise, such large and heavy creatures belonged to the species Prosoptodon goliath. Let's talk about them in more detail. Yes, it was an herbivore, but there were too many dangers lurking around to feel at ease. Moreover, due to its weight, the Prosoptodon likely could not jump like modern kangaroos. It didn't have a flexible spine, proportionally long legs, or a large tail. All the things that enable kangaroos to jump quickly as their preferred way of getting around. Instead, the Prosoptodon had larger thighs and knees, a stiffer spine, and a neat tail. All of this was necessary for a more upright posture and bipedal walking, similar to humans. Therefore, if an ancient human heard a crack nearby, it did not always mean an ambushing predator. It could have been a Prosoptodon trudging its way through the trees in search of the tastiest vegetation. To make it easier to tear off leaves, the giant kangaroo had 2 elongated fingers with large claws on each of its front paws. In case of a predator attack, these claws would turn into a self-defense tool. A strike with these claws could inflict serious wounds on an unlucky predator. Then the tail would come into play, knocking the attacker off their feet. Therefore, the Prosoptodon was not an easy prey. The giant went extinct about 45,000 years ago, but not because of the Pleistocene carnivores. Scientists believe that the main predator responsible for wiping out Prosoptodons was humans, who overhunted them to the brink of extinction. Well, a heavyweight kangaroo is unlikely to scare a seasoned viewer. But what if you attached a tapir's head to a bear's body, put a long giraffe-like tongue into the creature's mouth, and added a pouch that opened backward? Please tell us at what point this started to sound like a horror movie. But that was an actual nature's creation called the Palechests. The largest species were about the size of the Prosoptodon but were much heavier. Its body mass could exceed 1,000 kilograms. That's the same weight as 2 adult male grizzly bears or 4 adult male polar bears. The animal had small eye sockets, so it's believed that Palechests had very poor vision and possibly relied more on its sense of smell. A complete skeleton of this unusual animal, which went extinct around 40,000 to 50,000 years ago, has not yet been found. This greatly complicates the scientific research. Palechest fossils are very rare, even though this animal lived throughout Australia for millions of years. There is little to rely on, so scientists are left to speculate and dig diligently, hoping for a stroke of luck. Here's how it all began. At first, Palechests were thought to be a prehistoric kangaroo. That's why it was named Palechest, which is Latin for ancient jumper or ancient dancer. Then it was renamed the giant wombat. But the more skeletal fragments researchers found, the clearer it became that it was a very strange animal, unlike either kangaroo or wombat. Its elbow joints were immobile, and its bones were positioned at about a 100-degree angle to each other, so its limbs were constantly bent. The structure of its hind legs allowed it to stand upright if needed, for example, when reaching a high branch. Its powerful tail could provide additional support when standing upright. Its front paws were equipped with long, retractable claws, similar to a sloth's. After discovering some new remains, its head had been compared more to a tapir's head than anything else. Some paleontologists even based their reconstructions on the okapi. Palechest was strange and mysterious in all its features. It seems that it was a solitary animal and avoided large groups. This conclusion was drawn by some researchers based on how extremely rare these giant marsupial finds are. Eventually, fossils analyzed showed that Palechest wasn't as slender as okapi. On the contrary, it was a squat and bulky quadruped. For a long time, paleontologists believed that Palechest had a small, tapir-like trunk. However, recent studies suggest that it most likely had a long tongue and a prehensile upper lip instead of a trunk. After the okapi, researchers began to use the tapir as a basis for the image of the Palechest, and in the early 21st century, scientists began to describe it as a ground sloth-like creature. It seems that until a complete skeleton is found, researchers will continue to look for its traits in all Australian fauna species. It's a creative and fascinating endeavor. Myelania, one of the largest turtles in history, raises far fewer questions. There are plenty of fossil finds of this vertebrate. Despite being herbivorous, Myelania had a rather intimidating appearance. It looked more like a member of the ankylosaur genus. However, in the 19th century, when the first fossil fragment of Myelania was found and studied, researchers thought it was a giant lizard. Only later did it become clear that this was an entirely new animal species for science. It's unlikely that anyone in their right mind would want to put this giant in a home terrarium today. You'd need a separate building just to accommodate the turtle. Just its shell alone was 2 meters long, and with the head and tail, the animal reached up to 5 meters in length. But that's not the most important thing. What made Myelania's appearance even more devilish were the 2 massive horns on its head and a spiked tail. All these protrusions most likely served for self-defense. However, hardly anyone would want to test this theory if this thing roamed around behind a thin terrarium glass. Interestingly, Myelania couldn't retract its head into its shell because its horns got in the way. But it didn't seem to mind. Firstly, it had a strong armor. Secondly, with giant predators constantly roaming nearby, there was simply no time for reflection. However, scientists weren't sure if Myelania was such a coveted prey. It moved slowly, but it was too much trouble to deal with due to its strong shell, protrusions, and spikes. It's doubtful that, given its intimidating appearance and armor, Myelania would surrender to a bloodthirsty predator without putting up a fight. On the other hand, humans could have reduced the number of giant turtles. Some Myelania finds abound with cut marks, burns, and fractures. However, scientists don't solely blame humans for this vertebrate's extinction. Climate change and rising sea levels played a big role in this process. For a continent as small as Australia, these monsters were more than enough to scare all future generations. At this point, we should mentally applaud the brave Australian Aborigines. After all, they had to deal with many more monsters. Let's take, for example, the Diprotodon, a giant marsupial closely related to modern wombats and koalas that inhabited Pleistocene Australia. The name Diprotodon comes from ancient Greek, meaning 2 protruding front teeth. Indeed, the Diprotodon's most distinguishing features were large front incisors that grew throughout its life, much like those of rodents. The animal had no canines. It didn't need them, as Diprotodon was herbivorous. However, it had one special thing that ancient Australian fauna is famous for: an impressive size. From head to tail, the Diprotodon was no shorter than 4 meters and weighed almost 3,500 kilograms. Moreover, males were much larger than females. This was the largest marsupial ever to live on Earth. The heavyweight's stately gait made its presence more imposing. Diprotodon walked in a pigeon-toed manner, much like a bear, and moved no faster than a leisurely paced 6 kilometers per hour. It had small fingers, so most of its weight was supported by its wrists and ankles. It's quite a harmless creature, you might think. Just a rather large one. The truth is, it's not that simple. Based on the Diprotodon's jaw structure, it boasted a powerful bite that could easily sever a limb. However, it wasn't so much interested in limbs. The animal needed its strong jaws to grind through plant matter. After all, anything goes when it comes to protecting yourself against predators. Scientists estimate that Diprotodon's bite force was around 2,300 newtons. To put this into perspective, its arch nemesis, the Thylacoleo, had a bite force that was 1.5 times weaker. On its last molar, the bite force could reach an astronomical 11,000 newtons. With such a bite force, the Diprotodon could easily compete with a Mississippi alligator and would likely win. The size of this marsupial herbivore, combined with its powerful bite, made it a formidable opponent for the predators of the Australian megafauna. The exact nature of Diprotodon's relationship with the first human settlers is unknown. However, it's possible that the giant wombat became the prototype for the semi-mythical creature known as the bunyip, a beast that emits terrifying cries at night and devours animals and humans who dare to come close to its lair. If it wasn't the Diprotodon, there is another theory for who it could be. The frightening character from the Australian Aboriginal myths might have been the Zygomaturus, also belonging to the Diprotodon family. If ancient animals participated in a beauty pageant, this giant would surely win the title Mr. Big Cheeks, as its name translates to. It's hard to say what this animal resembled. Imagine a wombat weighing as much as a pygmy hippopotamus, with puffed-out cheeks, an upward-turned nose, elongated front legs, shortened back legs, and bear-like pigeon-toed feet. That would look something like a Zygomaturus. Weighing less than the Diprotodon, it was only 500 to 700 kilograms, standing about 1.5 meters tall and 2.5 meters long. Despite its large head, it was not as heavy as it seemed. Several air sinuses made the Zygomaturus skull lighter. Its huge cheekbones and 4 growths on top of its snout made its appearance even more distinctive. A powerful jaw muscle was essential for chewing the tough Pleistocene Australian vegetation. With such a considerable weight, the Zygomaturus led a rather slow-paced, possibly solitary life. It had to be even more cautious than the Diprotodon to avoid predators. Being 5 times lighter than its giant relative, it was an easier prey for carnivores. Unfortunately, the size of this marsupial, along with climate change and human influence, played a cruel joke on all Diprotodons. About 40,000 years ago, they, like almost all Australian animals weighing over 100 kilograms, went extinct. All right, maybe you need a break from the giant marsupials. How would you like to learn about the genus Ornis? This creature is not related to marsupials or reptiles at all. If you happen to know ancient Greek, you will immediately understand what it's about, or at least you'll have some idea of what makes it special, because genus means jaw, chin, and ornis means bird. Indeed, genus Ornis' most distinctive feature was its highly ossified large lower jaw, which was somewhat unusual for birds. And the bird itself was quite large. It was 2 meters tall and weighed on average 200 to 240 kilograms. Naturally, with such parameters, the bird was flightless. Although a complete genus Ornis skull hasn't yet been found, it is evident that the bird had a goose-like wedge-shaped head and a strong beak for breaking food. The scientific community still debates what the genus Ornis ate. On the one hand, the animal had a massive hooked beak, typical of predatory birds. On the other hand, instead of sharp claws, it had hoof-like, blunt claws on its feet. The discovery of gastroliths, special stomach stones found in the bird's stomach area, which carnivores did not use, supports the idea that Giornis was herbivorous. The test of the giant bird's eggshells also points to its herbivorous lifestyle. Considering the findings and the anatomy of the Giornis, researchers suggest that even if the bird was primarily herbivorous, it might have occasionally indulged in animal food. It is unlikely that people who lived at the same time as Giornis knew what it liked to eat. It was impossible to domesticate such a giant bird. However, people didn't mind eating eggs weighing no less than 1.6 kilograms. How they harvested these eggs is an interesting but unanswered question. Based on the evidence, scientists have identified no more than 200 sites across Australia containing charred eggshells. Protein remnants were extracted from the shells, and it turns out that some of the eggs could indeed belong to Giornis. This means that ancient humans collected, cooked, and ate the eggs of this species as far back as 50,000 years ago. So, it's that, once again, humans were responsible for gradually driving this giant bird to extinction. Naturally, it couldn't protect itself against humans. However, our next character could surely fight back if people even came close to it. We are used to thinking that a crocodile is dangerous only if you get close to the edge of a body of water. Of course, these fierce predators can occasionally hunt on land, but they can't chase prey for long due to their physiological limitations. Modern crocodiles have short legs positioned on either side of their bodies and not underneath them. Therefore, their top speed is 17 kilometers per hour, and they can only maintain it for a short distance. So a human definitely stands a chance of outrunning a crocodile. But just think about it. Over 20 million years ago, the Australian continent was home to monsters that could hardly be outrun even by the fastest man in the world, Usain Bolt. We're talking about the Quincana, a terrestrial crocodile. This bloodthirsty creature had long legs positioned directly under its body. Unlike water-dwelling crocodiles, the Quincana was perfectly adapted to moving on land. But it wasn't just the speed and size of this monster that terrified its prey. And these fears were quite warranted. With a body mass of more than 200 kilograms, the Quincana measured 3 meters in length and sometimes grew up to 7 meters. But wait till you hear about its teeth. It was the teeth of the land-dwelling crocodile that were a true nightmare for inhabitants of the Australian forests. Razor-sharp with serrated edges, they sank into the prey, leaving it no chance of escape. According to scientists, the special saw-like shape of the teeth suggests that Quincanas hunted on land. Once they caught their prey, they literally sliced it into pieces. Many predatory dinosaurs had similar tooth shapes and bite types. Compared to these ancient killers, modern crocodiles seem like angels. The most they can do with their smooth, rounded teeth is grab prey and drag it underwater. They can't chew, so they swallow small prey whole and tear apart larger prey with their jaws and front legs before swallowing. The anatomical features also indicate that Quincana was a terrestrial animal such as hoof-like toes and a tail with a round cross-section. However, some researchers believe that Quincanas needed fresh water for cooling and reproduction. When Australia began to experience droughts and water bodies started to disappear one by one, Quincana numbers started to decline. About 50,000 years ago, fires began to ravage the Australian continent, wiping out forests, meadows, and pastures. It was also around this time that the first humans appeared on the continent. We have no historical record of humans' first encounter with Quincanas, However, it was most likely far from a warm and pleasant interaction. In truth, the megafauna of that time had much more dangerous and bloodthirsty creatures than that. Near the Quincanas, there were giant monitor lizards known as Megalania, or as scientists now call them, Varanus priscus. The scientific name of this monster translates to ancient monitor. Nonetheless, the whole world continues to call this giant lizard Megalania. It was once thought to belong to a separate Megalania genus, which means great ancient wanderer in Greek. Indeed, this enormous lizard with a crested head roamed the land in search of prey. Once it found its prey, its fate was predetermined. Many mistakenly believed that the word lania in Megalania had a Latin origin and translated to butcher. Such an unflattering nickname could have well suited Megalania due to its hunting method and anatomical features. Megalania wasn't exactly a fast runner. Scientists estimate that it moved no faster than 10.8 kilometers per hour, which is roughly the average speed of modern freshwater crocodiles. Therefore, it likely ambushed its prey from the underbrush, then pounced and immobilized it by severing tendons. Megalania's teeth were sharp as blades, making it easy to handle animals much larger and heavier than itself. This bloodthirsty lizard enjoyed feasting on giant diprotodons as well as other reptiles, small mammals, birds, and their eggs. It's possible that Megalania used venomous saliva to help kill its prey. Since Megalania is closely related to monitor lizards, it might also have had toxin-secreting oral glands. This venom likely acted as an anticoagulant, thinning the blood and intensifying bleeding from the victim's wounds. Thus, the poor animal risked bleeding to death, even after escaping the predator. If researchers confirm that Megalania had toxic saliva, it will stand as the largest known venomous vertebrate. Scientists still debate the size of Megalania. This is because they have not found a complete skeleton of these creatures. In the early 21st century, some researchers believed that Megalania didn't exceed 4.5 meters in length and weighed up to 331 kilograms. But a few years later, in 2009, paleontologist Ralph E. Molnar, after studying the vertebrae of Megalania's modern relatives and analyzing the available remains of the ancient lizard, suggested that this dangerous Pleistocene predator was much larger. It could reach up to 7 meters in length and weigh up to 1,940 kilograms. In terms of maximum size, Megalania can be compared to the modern saltwater crocodile. But despite its impressive size and ferocity, most probably the giant lizard did not hunt humans. After studying 9 closely related monitor lizard species, scientists concluded that neither the muscle structure nor the limb anatomy of Megalania would have allowed it to catch bipedal prey. Nonetheless, people still feared this terrifying creature. It is believed that Megalania inspired the Australian Aboriginal myths about the monster Wambi. This creature resembled a monitor lizard but had 6 legs instead of 4 and a frog-shaped head. Wambi was so fierce that it could supposedly devour an entire tribe in one sitting. Thankfully, these were just myths, and the real Megalania went extinct around 40,000 years ago. However, in the late 1990s, there were many rumors that Megalania still lived in the remote areas of Australia and New Guinea. However, no evidence of its existence has been found. If the giant monitor lizard had indeed survived and proliferated like the dingo, Australia would have become a horrible place to live. Can you imagine an even worse scenario? Yes, that is, if you are terrified from just thinking about snakes. Hearing about Wambi might make you want to flee to another galaxy. This unique snake lived alongside Quincanas and Megalanias. Wambi did not resemble any of the snake species known today because it belonged to the extinct family of snakes known as Madswati. Wambi differed from other snakes in both appearance and structure. Its size was quite impressive, measuring between 4 to 6 meters in length, which could be compared to the anaconda. However, it had a small head with a primitive jaw, so it could not open its mouth as wide as modern snakes. Moreover, it was non-venomous. If you think this made Wambi a poor hunter, you'd be mistaken. It was a cold-blooded and cunning killer, ambushing its prey near water bodies. Wambi chose medium-sized animals as prey, such as kangaroos or wallabies. Once the prey was close, the snake would attack and coil around the animal, paralyzing it. Then Wambi would begin to torture it by squeezing the prey until it suffocated. The snake's muscles constricted the animal so tightly that it couldn't even take a breath. The prey's heart would stop beating, and only then would Wambi swallow its meal. Another interesting feature of the Wambi was discovered by a research team from Australia's Flinders University. Believe it or not, they studied snakes' inner ears. As you might recall, the inner ear is responsible for hearing, balance, and spatial orientation. There is a correlation between the shape of the inner ear and the animal's lifestyle. It changes depending on whether the animal's head is above ground, underground, or in water. Therefore, the creature's lifestyle can be inferred from the shape of its inner ear. It turned out that Wambi most probably preferred to live in cool, dry places. The study did not mention this, but it was unlikely that Wambi attacked humans, at least because such large prey was more than it could chew. However, children for sure should have kept their distance from Wambi. It's still unclear how Australian settlers could let their children wander around at all when the surroundings were teeming with monsters far worse than Wambi. Now take a look at the marsupial lion, or Thylacoleo. It would be inaccurate to call this creature a giant monster. It stood no more than 75 centimeters high at the shoulder and was up to 150 centimeters from head to tail. Its size is comparable to a modern female lion or tiger, so what made it so terrifying? Firstly, despite its relatively humble size, the marsupial lion had a prominent muscular build. Thus, taking into account its height, the animal had quite a considerable weight, up to 130 kilograms on average. Secondly, Thylacoleo had the strongest bite of any mammal species, both extinct and living. Just imagine, a marsupial lion weighing 101 kilograms had a bite force comparable to that of an African lion weighing 250 kilograms. This allowed it to hunt prey much larger than itself easily. The secret lay in its extremely strong, though relatively short jaw, tooth structure, and, strangely enough, its relatively small brain compared to modern mammals. Indeed, Thylacoleo didn't need a large brain because it would not have been able to develop such powerful bones and muscles, which gave it its signature bite. The predator's teeth deserve a special mention. They cannot be compared to that of any other carnivore, which is why many scientists initially thought Thylacoleo was herbivorous. This seemed only logical because the Thylacoleo's skull and teeth resembled those of a koala or wombat. It didn't have piercing canines, but it did have large forward-facing incisors. However, there were some inconsistencies. It was clear that the marsupial lion couldn't chew tough plant matter with those teeth. Instead, they seemed to be designed for stabbing, piercing, and cutting. The sharp, retractable claws on Thylacoleo's front limbs seemed even more confusing. These are only found in carnivorous mammals. Debates about whether Thylacoleo was herbivorous or carnivorous went on for over a century until scientists conducted a high-precision isotopic analysis of its remains. This test gave insights into the environment where Thylacoleo lived and offered the most accurate information about its diet. The study made it clear that this animal indeed consumed meat. So how could the marsupial lion hunt with such strange teeth? Even without canines, it bit into its prey with large incisors, instantly crushing the trachea, severing the spinal cord, cutting through major blood vessels, and then slicing flesh with its huge, cleaver-like premolars. Two large and sharp claws on its front limbs helped the predator hold onto and possibly stab the prey. While it takes an African lion about 15 minutes to kill its prey, the marsupial lion needed less than a minute. Thylacoleo specialized in hunting large prey. These could have been diprotodons or giant kangaroos. Smaller animals were more challenging for it. Just like modern leopards, it might have hidden its butchered prey in trees. Additionally, the marsupial lion had a long and powerful tail. The animal could have used it for support when standing on its hind legs, for example, when hunting. It's no wonder that the full Latin name of this predator is Thylacoleo carnifex, which literally translates to pouched lion executioner. Like the other giant predators and herbivores representing ancient Australia's fauna, Thylacoleo has not survived to the present day. However, humans who set foot on the Australian continent around 40,000 years ago not only survived alongside such dangerous neighbors, but have also thrived to this day. So, in the end, who was really the most terrifying and ruthless predator in ancient Australia?